The first gunshot shattered the parking lot light above my wife's head, and the second punched into the concrete inches from her shoes. Elena Cross dropped behind a parked sedan as 3 armed men spread out around her, cutting off every exit. I heard her breathing through the phone because she had accidentally called me when she reached into her purse. "Daniel," she whispered, and I could hear the tremor she was fighting to hide. "There are 3 of them." My eyes locked on the live location glowing on my screen. 4 blocks away. Maybe 5 minutes on foot. Too far. "Stay behind the car," I told her. "Don't move until I get there." One of the men shouted, "Lady, hand over the case." Another kicked the rear tire and laughed. Elena pressed herself against the cold metal, her fingers tightening around the phone. "What case?" she called back. "The one your husband stole." My stomach dropped. I knew exactly what they meant. 2 hours earlier, Elena had picked up a sealed envelope from an attorney named Michael Reyes. She had told me it contained documents from a civil case, nothing more. I had believed her because Elena was the one person in my life I never questioned. But now 3 cartel enforcers were hunting her in a nearly empty parking lot, and they knew my name. I grabbed my jacket and ran. The world narrowed into distance, timing, and movement. Every traffic light became an obstacle. Every second became a calculation. I had spent 20 years learning how to move through hostile environments without being seen. I had served in DeltaForce before retiring into a quiet life with Elena. She knew I had served. She didn't know everything I had done. Most people didn't. My neighbors thought I was a security consultant. Our friends thought I had worked overseas in logistics. Elena knew there were years I couldn't discuss, missions I couldn't explain, photographs I could never show her. She accepted that silence because she loved me. I had promised her that chapter was over. No more missions, no more hunting, no more violence. Then I heard her scream through the phone. "Daniel," a man's voice followed. "Your husband can't save you." I stopped running for half a second. Not because I was afraid, because I realized they had planned this. They knew who I was. They knew where Elena would be. They knew about the envelope. This wasn't a random robbery. Someone had studied my family. I reached the edge of the parking lot and saw 3 shadows moving between the vehicles. Elena was trapped near the far wall. One enforcer raised his weapon and stepped closer. I whispered into the phone, "Elena, close your eyes and stay down." She didn't ask why. She trusted me. I moved behind a concrete pillar, watching the 3 men and measuring the distance between them. My old instincts came alive so quickly, it almost felt like another man had taken control of my body. Breathing slowed. Heartbeat settled, noise disappeared. The parking lot became a map. 3 threats, 1 civilian, multiple vehicles, 1 clear escape route, but there was something I couldn't see. 1 detail was missing from the picture, and whatever that missing detail was, it would tell me who had sent them. I stepped from behind the pillar and shouted, "Leave my wife alone." Every head turned. Elena looked at me with shock and relief. The 3 men looked confused. The tallest one, a broad man with a black jacket and a scar across his chin, raised his weapon slightly. "You must be Daniel Cross. And you must be making a very bad decision," he laughed. "You think this is a movie?" "No." I kept my hands visible. "I think you're standing between me and my wife." His eyes narrowed. "We were told you weren't supposed to be here." That sentence told me everything. They hadn't expected me. Their plan depended on Elena being isolated. They had probably assumed I was still across town. The man with the scar gestured toward her. "She has something that belongs to our employer. Then talk to me. We're not here to negotiate." The second man moved around the opposite side of the car. I shifted my position so I could keep all 3 in view. Elena noticed. She had seen enough of me over the years to understand that my posture had changed. "Daniel," she whispered. "Do exactly what I say," I told her. "When I tell you to move, run toward the blue truck." The scarred man heard me. "Nobody is going anywhere." Then he raised his weapon. Everything happened at once. I moved. Elena dropped. The shot cracked through the lot. I closed the distance using the parked vehicles as cover, forcing the men to hesitate because they couldn't get a clear line without risking each other. The second man stumbled backward when I slammed the driver's door into his arm. His weapon hit the pavement. The third rushed toward Elena. She grabbed a metal parking barrier and swung it hard enough to make him retreat. "Run!" I shouted. Elena sprinted toward the blue truck. I moved between her and the remaining men. Scarred man fired again. Glass exploded beside me. I felt fragments strike my jacket but kept moving. My training took over. I disarmed him and forced him to the ground without firing a shot. The other two ran. I didn't chase them. Elena was still my priority. She reached me, breathing hard, tears streaking down her face. "You said you were done with this." I looked at her. "I am. That didn't look like done. I didn't come back for them." I glanced toward the road. "I came for you." Sirens appeared in the distance. The man on the ground groaned. Detective Marcus Hale arrived with officers minutes later. He recognized me immediately. "Daniel Cross?" "Yes." His eyes moved toward the restrained man. "You know what this is?" "I know it's bigger than 3 men in a parking lot." Elena handed me the envelope. "They were after this." I opened it just enough to see documents covered in names, transaction numbers, property records, and photographs. Then I saw one name that made the temperature inside me seem to drop. Victor Salazar, a cartel financier believed to have disappeared years ago. Elena looked at me. "Daniel, I need to tell you something." "What?" "Michael Reyes wasn't just my attorney." She swallowed. "He was a federal informant." Before I could answer, Hale's radio crackled. An officer had found something inside the suspect's vehicle. A photograph, Elena's photograph. Beside it was another photograph, me. Taken outside our home. The third picture showed our daughter, Sophie, walking into school. I stared at it until my vision blurred. The parking lot attack wasn't the end of the plan, it was the beginning. But why had they been watching my family for weeks? That night, Elena and I sat across from each other at the kitchen table while Detective Hale's team secured the house. The twins were asleep upstairs. Sophie was 14, Ethan was 12. They had no idea how close danger had come to their front door. Elena looked exhausted. "I should have told you." "Yes," she nodded. "I was afraid." "Of them?" "Of you." That answer hurt more than I expected. "Why would you be afraid of me?" She reached across the table and took my hand. "Because I knew what you used to be." I looked away. "You never saw that side of me." "No. But I saw what happened when you woke up from nightmares." I stayed silent. Elena continued. "You would sit on the edge of the bed and stare at the wall like you were somewhere else. Sometimes you would check every window before you came back to sleep. You told me you were finished with that life, Daniel. I believed you, but I also knew that if someone threatened our children, you wouldn't hesitate." I looked upstairs. "You're right." She squeezed my hand. "That's why I didn't tell you about Michael." The documents were part of a federal investigation into a financial network connected to Victor Salazar. Salazar had spent years laundering cartel money through legitimate companies. Reyes had been gathering evidence. Elena discovered that several properties connected to her accounting clients were part of the network. She had begun quietly tracing transactions. Then Reyes disappeared. 2 days later, Elena received a message telling her to stop. She didn't. "Why didn't you go to the police?" I asked. "Because someone inside the department was leaking information." Detective Hale confirmed it. He had suspected corruption for months. The 3 men from the parking lot were only local enforcers. The real operation was larger. The documents could expose politicians, businessmen, law enforcement officers, and cartel intermediaries. Elena had become dangerous because she could connect the money to the people receiving it. I picked up the file. Who else knows? Too many people. Hale entered the room. "And that's the problem." He placed a photograph on the table. It showed the parking lot suspects meeting with a man outside a warehouse. "We identified him," Hale said. "His name is Rafael Cortez." I recognized the face. Cortez had appeared in an intelligence briefing years earlier. He wasn't a cartel soldier. He was a logistics coordinator, a professional organizer, someone who didn't get his hands dirty unless absolutely necessary. "He's not working alone," I said. Hale nodded. "We believe he reports directly to Salazar." Elena looked between us. "What happens now?" Hale answered. "We move you and the kids somewhere secure." I shook my head. "They already know our routines." Hale frowned. "Then we change everything." The next morning, federal agents moved the children to a protected location. Elena went with them. I stayed behind to help Hale identify the people connected to the documents. For the first time in years, I opened an old metal case I had kept locked in storage. Inside were photographs, identification cards, old awards, and a small notebook. I hadn't touched it since retiring. On the first page was a handwritten line from my former team leader, Marcus Bell. Trust your instincts, but never let anger make decisions for you. I stared at those words for a long time. Then my phone rang. Marcus Bell was calling from Montana. Daniel, he said. I heard Elena's name. How? Because Victor Salazar just resurfaced. I stood up. Where? Marcus paused. He's not hiding. Then where is he? He's coming for you. The warning arrived 6 hours later. A black envelope appeared on the windshield of my car, inside a secured federal parking garage. No fingerprints. No cameras showing who placed it there. Inside was a single photograph of Elena and the children at the safe location. On the back, someone had written, "We know where you moved them." My hands tightened around the paper. Hale saw my expression. What is it? I handed him the photograph. His face hardened. Nobody outside the task force knows that location. Then we have our leak. We immediately locked down the facility. Agents checked every vehicle, every communication channel, every credential. Nothing appeared compromised. That was when Marcus called again. Daniel, stop looking for the leak inside the task force. Why? Because the photograph may not have come from inside. Then how did they find the location? Marcus explained that Salazar's organization had spent years building surveillance networks through ordinary businesses, cameras at intersections, delivery routes, parking records, public data. People who didn't even realize they were helping. They didn't need one person inside the operation. They needed enough pieces to reconstruct the picture. That changed my approach. Instead of chasing the criminals, we followed the information. The task force mapped every movement connected to the photograph. A delivery van, a fuel station, a maintenance company, a security contractor. One connection led to Rafael Cortez. Another led to a private investigator named Thomas Vale. Vale had once worked for a federal contractor. He knew how surveillance systems worked. Hale brought him in for questioning. Vale denied everything. Then Hale showed him the photograph. Vale's face changed. Where did you get that? You tell us. Vale stared at the table. Salazar has people everywhere. Who gave you the location? Vale shook his head. I don't know. Then who paid you? Cortez. For what? Vale swallowed. To track Daniel Cross. I looked at him. Why me? Vale hesitated. Because Salazar believes you're the only person capable of destroying his operation. I almost laughed. I'm retired. Vale shook his head. He doesn't believe that. That night, Hale showed me the original federal intelligence profile on me. It contained years of information I thought had been buried. Missions, deployments, units, associates. Everything I had worked to leave behind was sitting in a government database. Salazar had somehow obtained portions of it. He knew I had served in DeltaForce. He knew my former team. He knew Marcus Bell. He knew where I lived. He knew my children, but there was one thing he didn't know. He didn't know what I had learned after leaving that life. I had learned restraint. I had learned patience. I had learned that the best victory wasn't always the loudest one. Sometimes, you simply built a case so strong that the enemy destroyed himself trying to escape it. Hale and I began feeding false information into different channels. Each version contained a different fictional detail. Within 24 hours, one of those details appeared in a cartel communication. We had found the leak. It wasn't a federal agent. It was a contractor working for the city's private security network. His name was Aaron Pike. He had access to cameras, traffic systems, and property records. He had been selling information for years. Pike was arrested quietly. Under questioning, he gave us the final piece. Salazar wasn't planning to attack the safe house. He was planning something much bigger. He wanted Elena alive. He wanted the documents. And he wanted me to walk directly into his hands. The question was why. The answer came from an encrypted message recovered from Pike's phone. Salazar wanted the documents transferred to an abandoned industrial complex outside the city. If Elena brought them, he would exchange her for the safety of our children. It was a trap so obvious that it almost insulted me. But the threat was real. If we ignored it, Salazar might hurt innocent people. If we went, he would control the location. Hale wanted to use a tactical team. Federal agents wanted to intercept the transfer. I insisted on one thing. Elena would not be used as bait without her consent. She looked at me when I told her the plan. You're not going. No, Daniel. I'm not going to let them decide what happens to you. She took my face in her hands. Then don't decide for me either. She wanted to help expose Salazar. The documents were copied. The originals were secured. The exchange package would contain harmless material while the real evidence remained protected. The operation was coordinated with federal agents. I wasn't supposed to enter the building. My role was observation and communication. That was the agreement. At sunset, Elena entered the industrial complex carrying the case. I watched from a secure position with Hale and a federal tactical team nearby. 3 vehicles arrived, then 2 more. Rafael Cortez stepped out first. He looked directly toward Elena. "Where is your husband?" she answered calmly. "Not here." Cortez smiled. "He'll come." He was right. Not because I had lost control. Because Salazar expected me to. I had anticipated that expectation. The operation moved exactly as planned until a new vehicle appeared. Black SUV. Rear passenger door opened. Victor Salazar stepped out. He was older than his photographs, gray at the temples, wearing an expensive coat. He looked at Elena and smiled. "You have no idea what you've caused." She held up the case. "You killed people for money. People are temporary. So is your empire." His smile disappeared. Then he looked directly toward the observation building. "Daniel." My radio went silent. Hale looked at me. "How does he know?" I watched Salazar turn toward the exact location where we were positioned. He couldn't see us, but he knew. Someone had given him the location. A second leak. The operation began collapsing. Federal agents moved. Cortez's men scattered. Salazar grabbed Elena and pulled her behind a vehicle. Hale shouted orders. I remained still. Every instinct told me to move. But I remembered Elena's words. "Don't decide for me." She had chosen to be there. She had chosen to help end this. I waited. Then she dropped the case. It hit the ground. The lid opened. Empty folders spilled across the pavement. Salazar stared down. "Where are the documents?" Elena smiled. "Somewhere you'll never find them." Salazar's expression changed. That was the moment the tactical team moved. Agents flooded the complex. The armed men surrendered or fled. Cortez was captured, trying to escape through a side entrance. Salazar ran toward a loading bay. Hale chased him. I followed at a distance, staying outside the operation. Salazar reached the far end of the building and turned around. He was cornered. He looked at me through the darkness. "You think this ends here?" I answered. "For you, it does." He laughed bitterly. "You were a soldier. You know how this works. Someone always replaces the man at the top." "Maybe." I looked at Elena. "But it won't be you." Agents arrested him. No gunfire. No revenge. No execution. Just handcuffs. The empire had finally lost its leader. But as Hale approached me, he didn't look relieved. He looked worried. "Daniel," he said quietly, "we found something else in Salazar's vehicle." He handed me a photograph. It showed Elena and me from years earlier. On the back was a date from before we'd ever met. Someone had been watching my life long before the parking lot attack, and that meant Salazar wasn't the beginning of this story. If you're enjoying this tactical action so far, make sure to hit that subscribe button for more daily revenge stories, because what happened next uncovered a secret I had spent years trying to forget. The photograph had been taken 12 years before Elena and I married. I was still serving. Elena was working at a financial firm that had unknowingly processed accounts connected to an international criminal network. We hadn't met yet. The person who took the photograph wasn't watching her because of me. They were watching me because of an operation I had participated in overseas. Salazar had inherited information from someone who had been hunting my former unit. Marcus Bell confirmed it when I showed him the image. "Daniel, there was an investigation years ago." "Into what?" "A network that moved money through private military contractors." "Salazar?" "Not directly. But one of his partners was involved." Suddenly the parking lot attack wasn't simply about Elena's documents. It was about unfinished business. Salazar had discovered that the man who once dismantled part of his network had married the woman who later uncovered its financial structure. 2 separate stories had collided, and my family had been caught between them. Marcus sent me an old report. Most of it was classified, but one section remained accessible. It described an operative known by a code name I had not heard in years. The operative had exposed a financial pipeline and forced several criminal organizations to abandon operations. That operative was me. Salazar had spent years trying to identify who had destroyed the network. He eventually found my name, then he found Elena. He believed she was the key to controlling me. He was wrong. She was the reason I refused to become the man he expected. Federal prosecutors used the new evidence to strengthen the case. Salazar faced charges connected to money laundering, conspiracy, witness intimidation, and Elena's murder. Cortez cooperated. Pike cooperated. Vale cooperated. The organization fractured. Assets were seized. Properties were forfeited. Officials resigned. The city began to understand how deeply the corruption had spread. But I wasn't satisfied. Not because I wanted more arrests. Because I wanted Elena's name cleared. Publicly, she had been accused of being involved with criminal finances. The truth was that she had been exposing them. Her records became evidence. Her testimony from earlier meetings became part of the prosecution. Her final actions became the turning point. At trial, the prosecution displayed the parking lot footage. The courtroom watched Elena cornered by 3 armed men. Then they watched the moment federal agents arrived. The room became silent. I sat beside Ava and Ethan. Ava held my hand. Ethan stared straight ahead. Salazar was brought into the courtroom. He looked at me. For the first time, there was no confidence in his eyes. Only calculation. The prosecutor asked him whether he ordered the attack. He denied it. Then Cortez testified. He described the planning. He described the instructions. He described the photograph of our family. Salazar's defense collapsed. When the verdict was read, Salazar was found guilty on every major count. He received a life sentence. Elena's name was cleared publicly. The judge described her as a courageous witness whose actions helped dismantle a criminal enterprise. I cried when I heard those words. Not because the justice system had finally done its job, because Elena was finally being remembered for who she really was. A wife, a mother, a woman who stood between corruption and the truth. After the trial, Ava asked me something I'll never forget. "Dad, are you going to be okay now?" I looked at her and realized I didn't know. Then Ethan put his hand on my shoulder. "Mom would want you to be." He was right. For years, I had believed survival meant staying ready for the next threat. But my children were teaching me something different. Survival meant learning how to live after the threat was gone. The months after the trial were strangely quiet. No surveillance vehicles, no threatening messages, no strangers outside the house. I started sleeping through the night again. Elena's absence remained, but the constant tension slowly faded. I returned to ordinary work. I took the children to school. I coached Ethan's soccer team. I watched Ava prepare for her first major academic competition. One afternoon, she came into the garage and found me cleaning an old military box. "What's that?" she asked. "A piece of my past." She sat beside me. "Can I see?" I opened the box. Inside were photographs of men whose names I hadn't spoken in years. Some were alive, some were gone. Some had disappeared into classified histories. Ava picked up one photograph. "You look different." I smiled. I was different. "Were you happy?" I thought about it. "Sometimes." "Were you scared?" "Often." She looked at me. "You never told Mom?" I told her enough. Ava placed the photograph down. She knew. I nodded. Elena had always known more than I realized. She knew when I was afraid. She knew when I was angry. She knew when I was pretending everything was fine. She had seen the soldier and loved the man. That was why losing her hurt so deeply. Years later, I took Ava and Ethan to the cemetery on Elena's birthday. We brought flowers and sat beneath the old oak tree. Ethan had grown taller than me. Ava was preparing for law school. I looked at them and imagined Elena seeing them. "Your mother would be proud." Ava smiled. "She is." We sat in silence. Then Ethan asked, "Dad, do you regret what happened?" I knew what he meant. "I regret that your mother was killed. I regret that I couldn't protect her, but I don't regret choosing the path we took afterward." He nodded. "Because you didn't become like them." Exactly. That was the victory. Not defeating Salazar, not proving I was still capable of fighting. The victory was refusing to let hatred define our family. One evening, Detective Hale called. He had retired from the department. "I wanted to tell you something," he said. "The city changed after the case." "Good. People started reporting corruption instead of ignoring it." I smiled. "Elena would like that." Hale paused. "She saved more people than she'll ever know." After we hung up, I stood outside and looked at the night sky. The world was quiet. No helicopters. No sirens. No gunfire. Just wind moving through the trees. I thought about the parking lot. The broken glass. Elena's voice. The three men who thought they had found an easy target. They had made the mistake of believing strength was something you could see. They saw a woman alone beside a car. They saw a husband who looked like an ordinary civilian. They never understood what was behind the calm. But the truth was, I didn't want them to know. I didn't want anyone to know. I wanted a quiet life, a family, a home, and despite everything, I still got part of that life. Elena was gone, but her children remained, her courage remained, her love remained, and every time Ava laughed, every time Ethan called me dad, I felt a piece of her still alive. That's what the cartel couldn't understand. They believed destroying a person meant destroying everything connected to them. They didn't understand that love creates connections stronger than fear. You can threaten one person, you can intimidate another, but you cannot easily destroy a family that chooses to stand together. And when the final judgment came, I didn't feel triumph. I felt peace. For the first time since the parking lot, I could breathe without listening for danger. Years later, people would sometimes ask why I didn't take revenge when I had the opportunity. They expected some dramatic answer, some secret mission, some final confrontation. The truth was much simpler. I had already taken everything Salazar could lose from him through the one thing he couldn't control, the truth. His money was gone, his influence was gone, his organization was gone, his freedom was gone. But most importantly, his attempt to destroy my family had failed. Elena's children grew up, they graduated, they built careers, they fell in love, they learned to laugh again. They never became obsessed with the darkness that had surrounded our family. That was Elena's final victory. One morning, Ava called me from her office. She had just won her first major case. Dad, I wish Mom could see this. I looked at Elena's photograph on the wall. She can. Ava laughed softly. You really believe that? I believe everything she gave us is still here. She became quiet. I love you too. After the call, I walked outside. The sun was rising over the neighborhood. Kids were riding bicycles. A dog barked behind a fence. Someone was mowing their lawn. Ordinary sounds. Beautiful sounds. I realized I had spent most of my adult life surrounded by extraordinary danger, yet the moments I valued most were ordinary. Elena pouring coffee in the morning. Ethan falling asleep on the couch. Ava asking impossible questions. Family dinners. Sunday drives. Those moments were worth more than every mission medal and every classified accomplishment I had ever received. My time in DeltaForce taught me how to survive when everything went wrong. Elena taught me why survival mattered. That difference changed everything. When the cartel cornered my wife in that parking lot, they thought they were confronting an isolated woman. They didn't know she had a husband who had spent 20 years learning how to remain calm when the world turned violent. But they also didn't know something even more important. That husband had spent the years afterward learning how to walk away from violence. That was the part they couldn't understand. They expected rage. I gave them discipline. They expected revenge. I gave them evidence. They expected me to become a weapon. I became a witness, a husband, and a father, and in the end, the law did what I couldn't have done alone. It brought their entire network into the light. I sometimes think about those three men in the parking lot. They believed they had cornered my wife. In reality, their attack exposed everything. Their fear created witnesses. Their mistakes created evidence. Their arrogance created the path that eventually led investigators to Salazar. They thought they were beginning a war. They were actually ending their own empire. Elena survived that parking lot because she fought. She survived because she trusted me. She survived because federal agents arrived. And even though she carried scars from that night, she refused to let those men control the rest of her life. When I look back, that's what I remember most. Not the weapons, not the chase, not the arrests. I remember Elena standing in the middle of that parking lot, frightened but refusing to surrender. She looked at me afterward and said, "You came." I told her, "I always will." I didn't know then how important those words would become, because sometimes a promise isn't about preventing tragedy. Sometimes it's about what you do after tragedy comes. I couldn't save every moment. I couldn't undo the past, but I could keep showing up. For Elena's memory, for our children, for the life she wanted us to have. Today, if someone asks me what happened that night, I tell them the truth. 3 armed cartel enforcers cornered my wife in a parking lot because they believed fear would make her surrender. They didn't know her husband had spent 20 years in DeltaForce. But even that isn't the whole story. The real story is that they didn't understand who Elena was. They underestimated her courage, they underestimated her preparation, they underestimated the evidence she had gathered, and they completely misunderstood what would happen when a family decided not to be intimidated. The world often teaches us that revenge is powerful. Movies make it look simple. Someone hurts you, you hurt them back, and the story ends. Real life isn't that clean. Real revenge can destroy the person seeking it. Justice requires patience. It requires evidence. It requires people willing to stand together when fear tells them to stay silent. I had been trained to enter dangerous places. Elena had been brave enough to expose dangerous people. Together, without even knowing it, we created the chain that eventually brought down an organization that had terrorized our city for years. She paid a terrible price, but her courage wasn't wasted. Her children are alive, her truth was heard, her killers were convicted, and the man who ordered it will spend the rest of his life knowing that fear didn't win. If there is one thing I want you to remember from this story, it's this: strength isn't always the ability to fight. Sometimes strength is having every reason to become bitter and still choosing to protect the people you love. Sometimes courage is walking into danger, sometimes courage is walking away from it, and sometimes the hardest mission of all is coming home and remaining human after everything you've seen. Elena taught me that. My children taught me that, and I will carry that lesson for the rest of my life. Where are you watching from? Comment your city or country below. What kind of story do you want next? Military revenge, psychological thriller, or emotional family justice? And here's the question I want you to debate. If you were in my shoes, after seeing your wife surrounded by armed men, would you have waited for the police and trusted the justice system, or would the circumstances have pushed you to take justice into your own hands? Where would you draw the line between protecting your family and becoming the very thing you're fighting against? Tell me your answer in the comments. And if this story kept you listening until the end, stay with us for the next one. There are more stories about courage, betrayal, family, justice, and the choices people make when everything they love is placed at risk. Take care of your family, protect your peace, stay strong when life gets dark, and most importantly, remember that sometimes the greatest victory isn't defeating your enemy, it's making sure they never get to decide who you become. I'll see you in the next story.
Hi, hello, hello Karmanox, my viewer, how are you? I hope you are okay. This video titled The Armored Cartel informs surrender my wife in a parking lot. The did not know her husband was DeltaForce. Yes, it is very good title for this video and very interesting story for this video. I hope you must be watch this video complete and share friends and family and like my video, subscribe my channel, support us. Thanks for Karmanox. So this is very interesting video. You seen this story, watch this story, and must be your suggestion comment box below. I must be reply your comments and your other question. Ask me my personal email, and you other stories watch or Reddit. Click my channel Reddit link and go my web page and watch. Thank you. Goodbye.